Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the very first She Said of 1974. How about 2022? I have done a serious time warp today, that is for sure. I'm Lanea Stagg, the culinary chef and author of the 4-book series Recipe Records Cookbooks. You can collect fab, fun, rock and roll ideas and delight all of your senses. They're made to be used in the kitchen where, as you rattle those pots and pans, you can listen to great music lists suggested for each recipe. You can smell the exotic aromas of dishes such as I Am the Eggs Man and authentic Liverpool scouse recipe, which was sent by one of our wonderful guests today. And you can enjoy these with your family, friends, and set it all up for a wonderful evening, just enjoying rock and roll and great food. You can also learn about the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Foo Fighters, and so many other groups and rock stars that scan the history and trivia pages of these cookbooks. It's all there in the Recipe Records series. I invite you to check out these truly sensory books and my Little Dog series of cookbooks as well at laneastagg.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for my free newsletter.
Hey guys, I have to tell you, I second everything that Lanea just said. And in case you've never seen the Recipe Records cookbooks, this is the original book that first came out that spans music from the 50s up through the 90s. She'll be doing one very shortly, I'm sure, on the music of the 2020s because it's our new favorite. Then there's the book of the 60s. These are the things your mama used to make and you love. And of course, our boys, the Beatles, great recipe, strawberry pie forever. My mom's strawberry pie is in there. And then the bad boys of rock and roll, although we all know nobody was badder than the Beatles. I mean, we have to be honest about this. But this is the Rolling Stones, Let's Spend the Bite Together. And they are magnificent. And by the way, I'm Lena's sidekick, Jude Southerland Kessler, speaking with her voice. Susan will know what I'm saying when I say that. And I'm the author of the John Lennon Series. It is a 9-volume series, which will cover John's entire life from his birth in 1940 up to December of 1980. We are currently in the brand new book that was released towards the end of October in 1965. This one is Shades of Life Part 1, because it only takes you through the first 8 months of 1965. And you say, why didn't you make a whole year? Well, because it was a busy year. They made the movie Help and its accompanying soundtrack. They went on the European tour in June to Spain, Italy, and France. They were nominated for the MBE. When John comes into the studio to make Help, he's talked into making it into a rock and roll song instead of the beautiful ballad that it was. But 7 weeks later, Paul comes into the studio with a beautiful ballad yesterday, and he's allowed to record it as is. And not only that, but solo. And there are riffs that are starting to form in the group. Also, John and Cynthia are struggling in their marriage, and LSD comes into play for the very first time and changes the whole picture. So there is a lot going on in the first 8 months of 1965. So you can check it out, read a sample chapter and a sample of all the other books at johnlennonseries.com. But enough about us and our gratuitous ads. Let's move on to the important part of the show, which is our very distinguished guest today. We are really honored to have these people with us because they're not only noted tour guides and authors, but they are also some of our closest friends on planet Earth. So we are so glad to have them with us today. One of them hails from the metropolis of London, England. One hails from my favorite city on the globe, Liverpool, as it were. And one hails from the city so nice they had to name it twice, New York, New York. Isn't that right, Lanea?
That is right. Our first guest this evening hails from the busy cosmopolitan city of London, where he has been a Beatles tour guide for the past 30 years.
Woo!
Tours are legendary, and he's been recognized for the excellence of his work on Sky News, BBC Breakfast News, BBC London, and so many other respected programs, as well as being celebrated in print via The Guardian, the London Evening Standard, the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, Miami Herald, and many, many, many other newspapers, journals, and magazines. In 2009, he published the respected guide, The Beatles London. And on top of all of that, and there's more, he's one heck of a great guy. So we are thrilled to have for you the first time on She Said, She Said, the amazing Richard Porter. Welcome, Richard.
Welcome. Well, thank you, and welcome everyone. And thank you very much for having me today.
Richard, we're so delighted that you're here with us from Studio 2.
Yes. Well, actually, I'm at home, but I've been in Studio 2 a few times. I thought it'd be a nice backdrop.
That's very cool.
Look, I'm sitting at a piano, isn't it, in the studio? Yeah. Got the famous stairs behind me. Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
So, Richard, we're very delighted to have you join us all the way from the UK. And there is someone else waiting in the wings from your homeland as well. He's the author of so many remarkable Beatles books. He is such a special guy to us. His first was the classic study of how Liverpool affected and produced the magical band known as the Beatles, and the definitive look at the city on the Mersey. Aptly titled Liverpool, the book tells you all you want to know about the city, including famous people and places. To quote the staple singers, it takes you there. No less brilliant is his Fab 104, about all of the smart, talented, crucial people who influenced John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And 2020's wonderful Country of Liverpool explores the vast influence of country music. Amazing. In all of its various iterations of the Beatles. A study that is really fascinating and had never been done before. And now with Fab Four Cities, he is bringing us yet another great study of his unique hometown and another look at the cultures and ties that made the Beatles, well, the Beatles.
That's right. And I had to butt in and say this myself, because I remember the very first time that I saw the film that he produced, and at points in the film also stars in, called Looking for Lennon. And I just kept going, oh my gosh, that's right. Oh my gosh, that's right too. And that's right too. It is one of the few, maybe the only film that actually tells you the true story of John's childhood and his teen years, telling you the backstory about why Julia had to leave John with Mimi. It is one of the best, well, I think the best film made on John Lennon, and it's called Looking for Lennon. And it was so brilliant that we immediately invited him to be our featured artist at the Beatles of the Ridge Beatles Symposium. Lena and I are just thrilled to welcome to the show today our dear friend, Dave Bedford.
Oh, it's good to be here. It's good to be here. Love to see you again. Seems so long ago.
I know.
Seems ages ago. One honorary Scouser over there in Jude.
Thank you. Thank you. I miss it so much. I can't believe it has been, the last time I was there was 2000. It's been 21 years.
It's changed quite a lot since you were here.
I know.
You
I don't know
both
if
gotta
I'll
come
ever go
over.
anywhere again. I'm beginning to think this is going to go on forever, you know.
Ah, don't worry. You'll be back. You'll be back. Come
All
on, Lena,
right.
you've got to be here as well. Come on.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And last but in no way least, Jude and I feel very blessed to have one of our dearest friends and mentors on the program, a lady who inspired Jude to write the John Lennon Series.
This is
and
true.
has served brilliantly as the MC for the Beatles at the Ridge Festival, where she was amazing, as well as being one of the hosts and MCs for the Fest for Beatles fans and for the White Album Conference at Monmouth University in 2018, which seems like it was an age ago. She is an experienced tour guide of John Lennon's New York City. In fact, I took her tour and loved it and highly recommend it. And in that role, she co-starred in the 2007 documentary video, John Lennon's New York, which can take those of you at home on that same tour from the comfort of your sofa. Over the years, she's also been the founder and editor for Rooftop Sessions, a collective for Beatles fans, for Beatles fan fiction. She owns and runs Fab Four NYC walking tours, and in her spare time, she is not sleeping. She serves as editor for many noted Beatles books, and now all of her varied experiences have been brought to the forefront as she co-authored Fab Four Cities with these two lovely gentlemen. We are so very happy and smiling to welcome to She Said, our quite cool and multi-talented friend, Susan Ryan.
Woo! I'm really glad to be here. It's been way too long since we've all been in the same place. It's been a while since we've seen each other, close to 2 years, at least Jude and Lena. Richard and David and I managed to see each other because my husband and I got a trip in right before the COVID hit the fan.
Oh.
We were in London and Liverpool in February of 2020, if you can believe it. And 10 days after we got home, forget it. But anyway, I'm really glad to be here, really grateful for all the lovely things that Lena and Jude have said. You embarrass me, you humble me. I'm anxious to be talking about our book and our tours and just having a wonderful conversation here tonight, really enjoying seeing everybody and hoping that those people who are watching this really enjoy it as well.
Well, we are thrilled to have you here. And I have to say, this is their wonderful book. I read it cover to cover. As you go through here, you'll see underlines and circles and stars and hearts. And I have to say to everyone listening, this is a tremendous book. I had COVID when I was reading it, and I felt pretty awful. And it made me feel as if I were not in my bed sick, that I was in the heart of New York City, that I was walking the streets of Liverpool again, down Renshaw and Ranelagh, and that feeling that you get when you breathe the Mersey air. And I felt like I was exploring all of the places in London that I've been working on in Shades of Life. And you three are to be complimented. This is a really great book. And as you can see, it's a gatefold, so you can use it as your bookmarker. It is a hard paperback. It's a beautiful work, and it's small enough if you're touring the cities to fit into a purse or a knapsack or a rucksack, as Ivor Davis would say. And it is just really, really fantastic. And Dave, I'm guessing that you wrote the Liverpool section. Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no, I'll let Richard do Liverpool. I've done New York and Susan's done London. Now, of course, I've done Liverpool. I thought I'd catch you out, you see.
That's just like the time that I ordered a bourbon and Coke in, what is the Italian restaurant that's at Whitechapel? And
the Casa Italia?
Yes. And the guy comes and puts my drink down and says, "You're Scotch and Coke," and walks off. And I was like, wait. Then he just started laughing. Well,
Yes,
listen, you take us on this vivid tour of Liverpool. It's up close and personal. It reminded me of in 1993, Paul Beasley, whom I'm sure that you know.
Well, I do a podcast with Paul.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
He took us
mates.
on our first walking tour of Liverpool, and I'll never forget it. And that's exactly how you made me feel when I was reading this. You not only told about the place with the Beatles, but you also gave an extensive history. We learned a lot, things that I never knew before. So will you do that for us for the Cavern and kind of make the Cavern come alive for us? I mean, I think most people know the Beatles played there 292 times or over that. There's, some little question mark, but
Who knows?
okay. Tell us about the Cavern.
Well, the original Cavern, of course, was demolished back in '73, despite protests. It's still held up as one of the worst decisions Liverpool City Council's ever made. And trust me, they've made a lot of bad decisions, and still do to this day, which is quite remarkable. But the original Cavern, of course, me being so young, I was only 8 years old when that was pulled down. So, of course, I missed all the Beatles stuff. So that's why I'm so interested in the history, because I wasn't there. And I've spoken to so many people who attended the Cavern. Now, one famous story from my mother-in-law is one lunchtime, her and a friend from work decided to go and see the Beatles at lunchtime. And they went down, and of course, the ladies back then had the beehive haircuts. It was all done like sugar soap and all kinds of stuff. Now, the Cavern was it was a death trap. It was an old vegetable warehouse in the basement. There was only one way in and out through these 18 stone steps. No fresh air, sweat, condensation, cigarette smoke, all that. So my lovely mother-in-law got halfway down the steps. The heat hit her and the hair started to wilt. So she turned around and went back out again and never got to see them.
Oh, no.
She never went back. Oh. Just because of it. Just because of her hairdo. But
it's the saddest story I've ever heard.
It's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the place was it was a nightmare because it was just this old abandoned warehouse that still smelled of the old vegetables and stuff that used to store down there. It wasn't made for 500 or 600 people to be down there dancing. So when you got down there, this haze hit you, and it'd be cigarette smoke, it'd be condensation, body sweat. They'd have these rotten toilets, and I'll be as tactful as I can with this. But a good friend of mine said to me, when you went into the gents' toilets, because they overflowed most days, they had a couple of bricks down and they put a plank of wood on top so your shoes wouldn't get ruined. So because of, so you're getting the sense of the smells, aren't you? So to kill all the smells of the toilets, you had this really strong pine disinfectant that they put down. Of course, the mixture of the chemicals was quite lethal as well. But of course, back then, there was no alcohol served in clubs like the Cavern. It was tea, coffee, Coca-Cola. You get soup and a roll. You had to be wanting to see the band and listen to the music. That was the whole point of these clubs. Virtually all of them were alcohol-free. So you were only going there for the music, and you would be insane if you went in there for any other reason. Because if there was a fire hazard of something like that, you've only got the one way out. So it was a nightmare. But for everybody who was there and said the feeling was amazing. The atmosphere with everybody in there, and to see the Beatles, I say getting on for 300 times they appeared there. And if you think about it, in only 2.5 years, that's how many times they played in 2.5 years, nearly 300 times.
Wow.
And of course, their debut, and this is where the connection sort of started for us. The debut was the 9th of February, 1961. And what were they doing exactly 3 years later? Apparently, they've been formed on a television show in another country somewhere. Who knows?
Somebody.
Yeah,
Ed
exactly.
Someone.
Yeah, Ed someone. But that's how we got into doing all this. It was knowing these stories and how pivotal the Cavern was. It's crucial. That's for those who attended right through that period. They saw these lads in their scruffy black leathers who were this really early rock and roll band The sound was unbelievable. You got Pete Best thumping that drum, Paul pounding on the bass. The noise was incredible. By the time they finish in August 63, it's John, Paul, George and Ringo in their nice suits. And the Cavern hasn't improved because partway through, the electrics fuse. So it wasn't the greatest place, but it was the greatest place. It was so important. And all those people who've told me those stories, I think it's when you get told about the smells, something about it, it's you can sort of picture it because you've seen the photos. And of course, there's a recreated Cavern there now. And the good thing about it is there was like 15,000 of the original bricks, because when the other one was demolished, they just filled it in. So they used a lot of the original bricks. So the dimensions of the tunnels are right. They're at 90 degrees to where the original was. Unfortunately, it's not as good because the toilets don't overflow. There's no cigarette smoke. There's no condensation. So actually, it is quite nice. And the weirdest thing about it was people in Liverpool have argued ever since it was pulled down as to where the entrance to the Cavern was. And I remember Bill Heckle, director at the Cavern, found a photo from Bob Wooler looking out up the steps into Matthew Street and realized exactly where the original Cavern entrance was. And by coincidence, it's the fire exit to the current Cavern Club. Now, nobody knew that until they found that photograph. But even with that evidence, some people in Liverpool will still swear it's further up or down Matthew Street, even though we know for a fact that's where it was.
But it is the fire exit. Today, the fire exit is the original entrance.
That is the original entrance. So they've got a lovely photo of Paddy Delaney. It was like full size on the fire exit where you can actually see that's where he stood.
See, I've been there 25 times and no one ever told me that. That was the first time I ever heard that when I read it in the book.
Yeah.
So it blew me away. All right, I'm going to read you a quote from page, looks like 36, if I can read correctly. And I want you to tell me who said this and don't peek, and what they were referring to. All right, I'll read it in not my voice. Hi, everyone. Welcome to we're the Quarrymen, and we're going to play you some rock and roll. Who said it?
I know that's Mr. John Lennon Esquire. He of the Quarrymen, the opening day of the Casbah Coffee Club, 29th of August, 1959. And of course, what happened 7 years later to the day? Candlestick Park, San Francisco, the Beatles' last concert.
See, I love these connections you guys made. You do this all through the book. It's so awesome. Yeah.
That was the fun of it. It's making all those connections and coincidences. There's so many of them. But that was it, 29th of August, 1959. John, Paul, George and Ken Brown opened the Casbah Coffee Club. And I know we've just been talking about the Cavern, but really, for me, the Casbah is the birthplace of the Beatles. Because with Mona Best there, putting these gigs on, when they first come back from Hamburg, the end of 1960, the Casbah is the place that they first play. The reason that they ended up in the Cavern is because Mona Best rang Ray McFall at the Cavern and said, I've got this great group, they'll go down a treat. And so Mona actually got them into the Cavern. So they were actually at the Casbah first, and that was their base, really, until you're getting into 62. Because of course the Casbah closed in the June of 62. Brian was then manager. Things started changing, but they were still using the Casbah as a base, even after Pete Best had left in the August of 62. So really, that place, because it's still authentic, when you go, and I've been hundreds of times, and it is like walking back in time. It's absolutely incredible. Really, it's got this whole ceiling that John Lennon hand painted. You just put your hand up and you touch it. Got the ceiling that Paul painted. Got the walls that George, Pete, Cynthia, Stu Sutcliffe, all were involved in painting this place. It's absolutely incredible. So I love the Casbah.
Yeah, me too. And I only got to see it from the outside when I was there. Road met us out there on a bitterly cold day. We did not get to go in. We only got pictures of the outside. And at that time, it was not restored. So, it was, I would love to go back and see it inside. All right, Dave, because you wrote both Liverpool and the Liverpool section of this book. I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions and you tell me what place I'm describing. Are you ready?
Go on.
All right, first one. Landscape designers used this place as the template for New York City's Central Park.
I know that one. Easy peasy. Birkenhead Park. So, Birkenhead's on the Wirral, which is the peninsula opposite Liverpool. So if you go on the ferry across the Mersey from the pier head, you go across to Birkenhead, or Broken Head, as we like to call it. And yeah, it was the first public park that was financed by the public, opened back in 1847, I think it was. And it was visited by the American garden designer, and he liked the idea, took it back, and then when he got the contract for the designing of Central Park, they used the template of Birkenhead Park for Central Park.
And it's part of Port Sunlight. And, you know, when I stay in the hotel in Liverpool, they always left us flyers for Port Sunlight. I'm like, I don't want to go out to Port Sunlight. What do I care about Port Sunlight? I want to see the Beatles places. Well, little did I know, it is a Beatles place. And you tell that in the book.
Well, exactly. And it's amazing when people come on Beatles tours, and I always try and say to them, look, when you come into Liverpool, don't just pop in for a day. You know, you've got to come and stay here for a few days. There's so much to see.
Yeah.
The most I've ever done as a private tour is 7 days.
Wow.
You know, and we went absolutely everywhere. Went out into North Wales, down to Chester, did all kinds of places.
Wow. Well, you know so much history that I didn't know from reading this. All right, here's another one. This one's even easier, but anyway. Okay. Alan Williams was inspired to create and open a new club in Liverpool based on what venue in Hamburg?
That's the top 10. Very short-lived was the top 10. I remember the first time I met Alan, and he was telling me all about it. And a lot of people thought because it burned down very soon after opening, they said, oh, no, it's an insurance job. But it wasn't. Alan lost a lot of money on that. He really did.
We'll have to talk about that after the show.
Oh, yes. He loved talking about that. Yeah. But the plan was the top 10 was going to be, you know, the same thing in Liverpool, like in Hamburg. The Beatles were going to be the main band. Bob Wooler was going to be the compere. It was all set up. I mean, it was in the wrong part of town, unfortunately. It was a little bit further out. But yeah, it would have been nice. But again, it's those connections, and particularly with Alan, you know, Hamburg and Liverpool, that he's the one who connects the two. And without Alan Williams, and I'm glad the last time I saw Alan, shortly before he died, I said to him, Alan, you do realize that if you hadn't have done what you did in 1960, we wouldn't have the Beatles.
No, he has ignored, really and truly, somebody needs to write this Alan story, because he not only got them their first gigs and starting with the Jacaranda, but without him and the Mac Shaw thing, they wouldn't have been the Beatles. You know, they were standing around like wooden Indians. So, you know, he's important. All right, last one. This Liverpool pub was the place where the Beatles used to pick up their pay packets on a Friday afternoon from Brian. And as far as I know, it is the only one that has not been redone.
There's a couple of them in the area that haven't been redone. But two of the authentic ones, you've got to get the famous grapes and the White Star just around the corner, again, just around the bottom of Matthew Street. This sort of links in with what I was saying before about the Cavern, was because the Cavern, you know, and the Iron Door was close by and all these other clubs, there was no alcohol in there. If you wanted alcohol, you'd go to the pub before and after. And the grapes is, because Matthew Street, when you get to see Matthew Street again, it is so different, and not all good. It's been overtaken by so many bars and stuff. It's lost, I think, some of its character, because the grapes was the original. You know, it's been there for hundreds of years. There's that great photo which is up on the wall in there, John, Paul, George, and Pete, and they're sitting there, and they used to have their little snug in the corner where they sit. It was near enough by the toilet so they could see the girls going in and out. I have no idea why. But you can go and sit exactly where they sat, and it's had a makeover, but it still feels authentic. That
Yeah.
was where all the musicians used to go. The bit of Dutch courage or an excuse for a drink.
I used to, we went several years before they did the interior punch up. And it was when the Blue Tail fireplace was there and all of the original stuff and the corkscrew tables and, where they used to put the wet beer mats up on the ceiling. And it's a great, I love the grapes. I really do. And the White Star as well. A gentleman asked me in the White Star to watch his metal box while he went to the loo. And Rand comes up to the table and goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "This man asked me to watch this metal box for him." He was like, "Are you insane?" And I said, if I'm going to get blown up, I want to get blown up right here in the White Star. So I don't think he was quite ready to go yet. All right, we're going to skip the next one and move on because we have to think about our time. But listen, I have to tell you, great job. Your writing is magnificent. I loved the Liverpool section. It just made it, I don't know. I felt like I was there again, and I really miss it very much. So you even take us out of the city. We go to Latham Hall and we go to Litherland, and you don't just concentrate on Liverpool proper, but you bring in the environment. So thank you for a great job on that.
Pleasure.
All right,
That's
Lena.
all right, Dale. Ta-la.
Love it.
So we're going to move on to a place that is on a lot of the bucket list for a lot of people, and I'm excited to hear more about this. Richard and Dave, I believe you both worked on the Hamburg section of the book. Is that right?
Yeah, we went together. We went to Hamburg together a few years ago and had a great time. Shown around by some really nice people and saw all the places. And it was my first time in Hamburg, and it was thrilling just being there and seeing all these places. And they're so close together as well, which surprised me. I mean, it's Grosser Freiheit. It's only a very short street.
You didn't get arrested for anything while you were there?
No, no. I must admit, we did walk down Herbertstrasse, I must admit, but
that's awesome. That's awesome.
But we weren't arrested, no.
So your book, it certainly gives us all of the great places to look at and the photos for those who must tour from their home. You also give a detailed history of each location with stories that we'll never forget. I mean, I knew the Beatles had performed at the Star Club, but I didn't realize that Jerry Lee Lewis, Ray Charles, the Everly Brothers, and Gene Vincent had also headlined there as well. And I didn't know the full story of the Star Club tapes. So Richard, tell us a little bit more about the recording of that.
Well, that's quite a long story. It's December '62. It's really like their last week in Hamburg, and the guy that set up the tape was Adrian Barber, and King Size Taylor and the Dominoes, and basically a lot of people thought it was just the last night, New Year's Eve '62. But actually, it was recorded over about a week or so. It was on several gigs. And people just turned the tapes on. The tape recorder sat up on a table, and someone just push the on button when the Beatles are on stage. And a lot of songs were recorded. And it's the Beatles basically doing cover versions still. Not even really doing their sort of set at the Cavern. They were going back to their old rock and roll stuff from like 2 years before almost, but really showing their raw power. And of course, Ringo's with them by then, of course. And the Beatles themselves didn't like it very much, and they've been trying to stop it for God knows how long. And George Harrison appeared in court to try and stop it, and he said it was some drunks recording some other drunks and trying to stop the whole thing. I think is incredible. I think the music's brilliant, and you got even the Fascia brothers coming on stage, the Horse and Reed Fascia, and coming on stage and doing a couple of songs, and it's just brilliant. And of course, Alan Williams got involved with King Size Taylor, trying to sell the tapes to the Beatles and other people. And for a long time, the tapes were just stuck in this basement of a derelict building in Liverpool, and they managed to get into this building and get the tapes out. They're being damaged apparently. Lucky they're salvageable. So now we've got the Hamburg, we've got the Star Club tapes. But it's funny that it came out on this record company called Linla Song. I think the original people that bought it out, and because the Beatles had their contract already with EMI, which started in June '62. The Linla Song people said the tapes were made in April '62 on their trip before. Obviously, before with Ringo Starr sitting in for Pete Best, and of course making it before they got their recording contract, which is a total lie. I knew the lie, I'm sure, but it's a total lie.
Oh my God.
And you can talk for hours just about the Star Club tapes, but listen to the music. I mean, it's the only recording of the Beatles, live at the time, and it's absolutely brilliant. So I don't know why the Beatles try and stop it all the time. I think it's great. Yeah.
So you have great photographs in your book from Hamburg, and pictures of the Indra and the Kaiser Keller. And so I know that they, as you'd mentioned, they had gone back to Hamburg in 1965. So Dave, tell us a little bit more of what happened when they returned to Hamburg in 1965.
No, Richard. Oh, Dave. Yeah, Dave. Yeah. Okay, wait a minute. Hang on, Dave. Just 1 second.
We cut out.
Okay, try it again. No, Dave's still not.
Yeah, he's in.
I know that's only me because I'm just messing about. Okay. You should know this by now. Don't work with me. Honestly. Moving swiftly along. It's a good job we're not in the same place. You'd be slapping me by now, wouldn't you?
No, I would be enjoying it. Are they either one of these what you're talking about, though?
I know that it's a different one. When it first came out, as Richard was saying, on Linga Song, was it 77?
Yeah,
It was
77.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then other recordings have come out, and they're the recordings they made with Tony Sheridan. Some in 60
okay.
and some in 62.
Okay, I thought maybe I had something valuable there for a minute.
Oh, they're still valuable. Don't worry, they're great. They're great.
All right, sorry to interrupt. Go.
That's all right. So the Beatles came back. It's actually in the summer of June '66. They came back on the Bravo Blitz touring, and they were so different. When you look at some of those great photographs, those amazing ones that Astrid took on that first trip in 1960, some of the best rock and roll photos of any band ever, in the black leathers on that fairground. And while Richard and I were there, the fairground was visiting, and it visits, I think it's 4 times a year. And it coincided while we were there, the fairground. So we actually got to walk around the Dom Fairground where those photos were taken. Again, it was real history. And as Richard was saying, the Große Freiheit, where all the clubs were, is so small. You one end to the other, in 5 minutes. It's amazing. But when they came back in '66, of course, they weren't in the black leathers playing the grotty little clubs. They were this Ernst Merkhalle, which sadly has been demolished. So we saw the site of where that was. But our guys and our friends took us around. We went to the train station where they arrived. So if you ever seen that, there's plenty of film footage, particularly on YouTube, of them coming off the train, going down through the underpass, etc. So we went to that station, down the steps, retraced that, then went into Hamburg as well. And of course, by now, the John, Paul, George and Ringo with their suits, and it's Beatlemania. So there's just lots and lots and lots of screaming. And there's some really nice footage that's been captured. And it is the only film footage of the Beatles in Hamburg. But it was nice that while they were there, they went down to the Große Freiheit and they met up with some of their friends from their earlier trips. And again, there's some bits of film footage out there of that as well, so that they were meeting some of the club owners and the people that they knew. And it was nice for them just a little bit of a nod to the place, really. As John said, you know, we were born in Liverpool, but we grew up in Hamburg.
Right.
That was the place, and I'm glad they got to go back in a way and do like a special thank you to Hamburg.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, Richard, so in the book, you have a description of the area in Hamburg in which the Beatles lived and they performed, and it was called I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, the Gross Freiheit.
Yeah.
It was fascinating and very thorough, and we learned that Gross Freiheit means great freedom.
Yeah.
And you spend a good deal of time explaining how this very appropriate term played out in the lives of the Beatles, but also the Exes that were in the 1960s. So tell how this name had an application to the lives of so many people that were in this area.
Back several hundred years, really. That area was the St. Pauli area where Grosse Freiheit is. It was very much the where people had religious freedom, political freedom. It goes back until sort of 1700s, I think the name came from. But even going up to the Nazi period, what the club that used to be on the site of the Kaiserkeller was a place where all the young people that like swing music would congregate, and known as the Swing Kids. This is in, during Nazi Germany, when, the Nazis didn't like that sort of thing, obviously. And they were persecuted. But the amazing connection is that when Glenn Miller spoke German, and he was really popular with these Swing Kids. And his last ever recording was for the American war effort, being broadcast into Germany from EMI Studios at Abbey Road.
Oh,
that was his last ever recording made at EMI in Studio 2, in fact.
Wow.
There's another connection there, you go. I mean,
yeah.
Unfortunately, when the club that became the Kaiserkeller was bombed during the war and was rebuilt. But that was the site of the Kaiserkeller. So one of these, there's actually a film made a while ago about the so-called Swing Kids. They used to dress sort of either American or British. So again, there's these amazing connections. Yeah.
Right. It's very interesting.
And should say that the kids of the Swing Kids became the Exes. A lot of them became the Exes. So there's the connection there as well.
Very interesting. Oh, well, there's so much more that we could explore in the Hamburg section of the book. The place, excuse me, the place where the young savage Beatles bought their leathers and purchased their cowboy boots and met Gibson Kemp, who weaves in and out of their lives, as does Klaus Vormann and Jürgen Vollmer, and of course, Astrid. You cover all of this so well in your book, Fab Four Cities. But because of time constraints, we're going to move on to the London section. And I'm guessing that is your ballywhack, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, Richard, I wish that you guys had this book out about a year and a half ago, because Shades of Life Part 1, they're in London, everything's taking place there. I could have really used your expertise and the information in the book, but I will definitely use it in Shades of Life Part 2. So thank you very, very much for all of the great info. So I got a couple of things. You know how I did the rapid fire for Dave? Yeah. Well, I got a couple for you. And the minute that you know the place, and you may know it when I just say the first sentence, just chime in. So in London, this great tour that you gave us of London, this is the place where all of the Beatles had the photo taken together in the doorway of this building. And Ethan Russell was the photographer.
That's the last picture, one of the last pictures taken at Tittenhurst Park. Of course, John Lennon's home. And then Ringo's. They often swapped out. They used to follow each other around London, actually.
They did.
Yeah, that was that. But But
When they went out to
Tittenhurst,
Weybridge, Surrey, they were together too, right? Sunny Heights and Kenwood, they were just
Yeah.
like, yeah.
and Montague Square as well. The apartment in Montague Square, it was Ringo's and then John. Well, anyway, Tittenhurst was then John's and then Ringo's. It's that way around. But so yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's the next one. This one to me was so interesting. It's in the section of the concerts in London. So this was the site of the Beatles' first concert as headliners. And it was very strange. And I'll let you tell the very strange part about it.
Yeah, Leighton swimming baths. It has to be said that London, even though it's about 10 times the size of Liverpool, had about a tenth of the number of music venues. And when the Beatles played in London, they played in places like cinemas, but this place was actually an indoor swimming pool. And they would put boards over the swimming pool like once a week and have concerts there. And all the bands, I mean, the Rolling Stones played there, all the bands played at this Leighton swimming baths. And that was the first sort of headline. This was April 63. I mean, Brian Epstein really kept them out of London until they were really, really popular. You would have thought they might have gone long before that, but that was their first gig as headliners, was April 63.
Wow. That's amazing, really, when you think about it. You know, and I don't think that's too good for the equipment to be above the pool.
No.
I mean, that could have ended disastrously.
Yeah. Oh, it's a funny thing that happened backstage. That photographer was backstage and took a picture of the Beatles. But just before the picture was taken, Paul McCartney squirted some toothpaste onto his trouser leg. And you can see Paul trying to cover up this toothpaste. And there's rumours that the stain was actually something else, but it wasn't. It was the toothpaste. Use your imaginations on that one.
Oh my God. Paul did not know the Paul Sutherland rule, which is, that's my dad, that you cannot put on your shirt until you have brushed your teeth. That was the big rule in our house. We should have passed that along. Okay, I'm going to ask you a lengthier question, and one that I think is really pivotal for the Beatles. You know, they end up playing in the autumn of 62, 63, Sunday night at the London Palladium. Right before they played the Royal Command performance. Yeah. And to me, this was a turning point because Ringo's aunt had always said, play the Palladium and die. You know, once you played the Palladium, you have made it in this world. There's nothing else for you to do. Just move on to the next. So do you tell us about the Palladium, and do you see it as pivotal as I feel that it was?
It was fairly, but yes. I mean, Beatles had been on TV before this, but the Palladium is a TV show, Sunday night at the London Palladium, which is very similar to the Ed Sullivan Show.
Right.
It's very much a variety show with, you know, what normally one act appealing to teenagers. In fact, Buddy Holly and the Crickets played their first ever gig in England at the Palladium on the show. So it'd been going quite a long time, and the Beatles topped the bill. And but there's lots of screaming girls outside, and this has been going on around the Beatles for a long time. But it's the first time really the Beatles have played in central London. So they've been playing in these places like Leighton before. So only just down the road was Fleet Street, where all the national newspapers were. And that's been a low news day. So virtually every newspaper sent reporters and photographers down to the Palladium to see what was going on. And next day, the Beatles and their fans were front page news in virtually every newspaper. And people have said that's where Beatlemania began, when actually the term wasn't used for another couple of weeks later. That's another story. But I think it did change things. And the Beatles were, you know, public property after that, really.
Wow, that is amazing. And so it was kind of the first time they really noticed Beatlemania. Yes. It really came to the forefront.
The general public, yes, definitely, yeah.
One of it's kind of a yucky story, but it tells you how much it meant to them, is that right before they went on stage at the Palladium, Ringo threw up in a bucket backstage. That's how nervous he was. You know, so much emphasis had been put on playing the Palladium that I don't know that he ever did that again. I know John threw up a couple of times, but he was definitely nervous. Well, there was a connection to New York with the Palladium? Was it the Buddy Holly performance, or what was the big connection with New York?
Really just after, really, because as I said, Beatlemania had just kind of started, and a couple of weeks after the Palladium show, the Beatles flew out to Sweden on their first overseas trip after Beatlemania, and when they came back into London Airport, loads of fans were there.
That's it.
And it's the first time this had happened, and there's lots of flights were delayed. And one of those flights was going to New York. And on that flight was Ed Sullivan, who he thought it was the royal family or something was delaying everyone. And it's been, well, this might be a bit of legend. Apparently he asked the stewardess, who it was. And she said, it's the Beatles, sir. And he said, who's the Beatles?
Yeah.
And of course, he found out. And just a few weeks later, of course, Ed Sullivan went Brian Epstein went to see Ed Sullivan in New York and got them on the Ed Sullivan show.
Yeah, it's amazing. You guys do this all through the book. You have inserts, the Fab Four Connections, and you talk about the link between the place and the other cities. And it really gave me goosebumps because there are so many uncanny connections. So speaking of New York City, we're going to shift gears and we're going to turn our attention to my closely tied with Liverpool favorite place on the planet, New York City. And this part was written by our dear friend, Susan Ryan. And Lena and we both wanted to interview you, Susan, and we were going to have this arm wrestling contest. But two things got rid of the arm wrestling contest. Number one, COVID. Number two, Lena is lifting like a maniac. I think she deadlifted 188 pounds. Is that right, Lena? Recently. And so ain't no way I'm going to be arm wrestling Lanea Stagg on the face of the earth. So she's going to pop in right now and ask you the first few questions, and then I'll be back in a little bit. So take it away, 188 deadlift pounds, Lena.
Absolutely. That's just sort of this byproduct of buying a gym. It just kind of organically started to happen. I don't know. It just osmosis is kind of, because not working out's not really my bag. But Susan, after taking my daughter and my niece Annie on your John Lennon New York tour a few years ago, I can't imagine anyone but you writing this segment of the book. You're a lifelong New Yorker, and you know the city better than the back of your hand, and you know the Beatles like the back of your other hand. So it was a win-win for Richard and David to have your input on this. In Fab Four Cities, you of course cover the famous New York concert venues such as Carnegie Hall and Shea Stadium, but you also take us to many New York sites that the boys frequently enjoyed that fans know little or nothing about. So if you don't mind, tell us about 3 of those wonderful sites that one or all of the Beatles frequented, places in their lives within New York that aren't widely known about.
3 that aren't widely known. I'm trying to think, because there are some in the book, but they're not vast. I mean, the ones that are more well-known that I could tell you about, I mean, certainly there's the Plaza Hotel, and that's very well-known. But that's where the Beatles stayed when they came to New York in 1964 on their first trip to America. And they weren't allowed to go back. So people don't always realize that, the Plaza is the hotel that people think of associated with the Beatles. But when they came back again, there were 2 other hotels that they stayed in. When they came back in the summer of '64 for their summer tour, for their tour of the United States after they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show months later, they were not allowed to go back to the Plaza. The Plaza's elite clientele didn't want them. They didn't like the hysteria. They didn't like the screaming. They didn't like the girls trying to hide in laundry baskets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they just didn't want them to come back. So when they came back in the summer of '64, they stayed at what was then the Delmonico Hotel, which is on Fifth Avenue. And it's now actually a building, a co-op condo building owned by Donald Trump, of all people, called the Trump Park Avenue. And people don't realize that that's where they stayed. Then when they came back again in 1965 and 1966 to play at Shea Stadium, which they were arranged to come to Shea Stadium by Sid Bernstein, who many people who listen to this program probably know about if they didn't actually know him, who was a concert promoter who brought the Beatles to Shea Stadium. He also did something else earlier. He brought them to Carnegie Hall. He was one that arranged for them to get the venue of Carnegie Hall on February 12th, 1964. He brought them to play at Shea. They stayed at the Warwick Hotel, which is where they stayed ever after when they came to New York. And actually, if you go inside the Warwick, and you go up the stairs to the mezzanine level, there are photographs of people who have lived and stayed there, and the Beatles are among the photographs.
Aw.
So if you go in, like,
That's
you can
cool.
make an excuse to go in and use the bathroom because the bathroom is up the mezzanine, and they'll let you in, or they used to anyway. And you could go see the Warwick Hotel. So those hotels are not as well known. People associate the Beatles with the Plaza, and only the Plaza, for a variety of reasons. Starting with, if you know Beatles history, you know that. Also, if you've ever seen the Steven Spielberg movie, I Want to Hold Your Hand, they're trying to get into the Plaza Hotel. So, that's what people think. So the other hotels are not as well known. And then, of course, there's the obvious places. There's places like Strawberry Field, and there's places, but there's also some venues that you wouldn't think, like Grand Central Terminal, right? Paul McCartney did a surprise gig when he was promoting Egypt Station. They gave away tickets to a concert in Vanderbilt Hall, which was a waiting room at Grand Central Terminal. And you don't think immediately of Grand Central Terminal of being a Beatles or McCartney related place, but he did a live set of music in Grand Central Terminal, gave away, you need a Metro card, a fare card to get on the subway, and they gave away promotional Egypt Station Metro cards to people who came to the gig. But you don't think of Grand Central Terminal, which, by the way, is worth seeing, Paul McCartney aside. It's really beautiful, and you kind of want people to see that. But these are places that don't immediately spring to mind when you think of the Beatles or John Lennon or Paul McCartney. And many such little venues or little places or apartments where they live, like one off Sutton Place where John Lennon lived with Mick Pang in the 70s. You don't think of those places, and those are lesser known than some of the big venues, which are obviously covered in the book as well.
And do you take people to those lesser known places when you do the tour?
Actually, the only one of those that I mentioned that we actually pass by on our tour is the Warwick. And that's mostly because the tour starts in Midtown on the west side and basically sticks to the west side of Manhattan and goes up to and ends at Strawberry Fields in Central Park. So we don't get to some of the places on the east side, but they're easy enough to find on your own. And especially if you have the book, you've got the address. And
Right.
if you're exploring Manhattan, the thing about Manhattan Island is it's very small. So you could technically do Manhattan and see the highlights of it generally in a day. If you give yourself from morning till evening on a nice day, you could even walk most of it. It's not a big island. So we may not go there on my tours, but certainly they're easy enough to find.
Right. And you brought up the next place, but before we get to that, I want to say that I did not mention the maps, and the maps are so helpful. And you can navigate your way, and you can follow the numbers, and they coincide with the book. It's so easy to use. But I don't want to tout this as a guidebook, because it's much more than a guidebook. You had, what was it, Ron Jones, Dave, that did the Liverpool guidebook. It's so much more than, it was a great book in its day. This tells you much more. And that's what I want to ask you, Susan. I think people generally have a view of Strawberry Field. They know, it's for John, and they kind of know where it is. But you told things that I had never known before. And you made me realize for the first time that the world came together to build this tribute to John. So tell us a little bit more about Strawberry Field.
Well, Strawberry Fields, as most people know, is directly across the street from Dakota. And it was back in the day, back when John and Yoko lived in that neighborhood in the mid to late 70s, Central Park wasn't nice. Central Park is beautiful now, but Central Park was actually kind of dangerous. And there was no such thing as the Central Park Conservancy that took care of the park. And it was one of those places where you kind of didn't go after dark, things like that. However, if you went into Central Park in broad daylight, it was fine. And because that part of the park was directly across the street from Dakota, that was where John and Yoko used to take walks. That's where they used to the nanny or they would take Sean when he was a baby for walks and play in the playground. Like most New York City kids, okay? He went to Central Park. My kid went to Central Park. It's the same, it's New York's backyard, so that's where you go. And when John was killed, the city wanted to do something in his memory. New York was very proud and happy that John wanted to live in our city. I know that I was. I know that I was thrilled that he wanted to live where I lived. And one of the quotes that I mentioned in the book is he talks about if you were lived in ancient Rome and you were Roman, you wanted to live in Rome. And New York is the Rome of its day, and he wanted to live in New York. And that's why he wanted to come here and be here. So when they were looking for a place to build this memorial for John, it was suggested by our mayor at the time, Ed Koch, and our Parks Commissioner, Henry Stern, at the time, to build this memorial directly across the street from Dakota, which became Strawberry Fields. Strawberry Fields with an S. Strawberry Field with no S's in Liverpool, and I always make that distinction. And they went to Yoko Ono, and they asked her what she wanted. And she said she wanted some kind of a living memorial because she felt Central Park already had enough statues. She didn't want a statue. They originally conceived it as a statue. And they worked on the design, and then they went to countries of the world and asked them to contribute plants and flowers and other materials. This was all Yoko's idea and Yoko's desire. She solicited various countries to give things to this memorial. And mostly it was plants and flowers and trees. They're getting better at labeling them now. They weren't always labeled. They did that. And she gave a grant in perpetuity to the Central Park Conservancy to maintain that section of the park. And the mosaic, which everybody knows and has seen, was actually donated by Italy. And it's a mosaic of Greco-Roman design based on a design from Pompeii. And that was what they wanted there. And it was opened with a special ceremony on what would have been John's 45th birthday. But it was basically conceived by the mayor and the Parks Commissioner, and they went to Yoko for her input, and this is what she wanted. And she brought the countries of the world together in a garden of peace. There is a dedication plaque. If you come in at the bottom end of Strawberry Fields, which is inside the park, so if you're walking through the park from the other direction and not coming in from 72nd Street, you walk up the hill to your right, and there's a big boulder, one of the Central Park boulders, with a bronze dedication plaque embedded in the rock. And it tells you all the countries that contributed plants, flowers, and other materials to the Garden of Peace. And I think that makes it a place that is international. It is a place where New Yorkers certainly go to celebrate Don. They also go there just to celebrate life. It's a beautiful meditative section of the park. It's lovely to go there and have a picnic. And you don't have to know who John was, just to know that it's a beautiful place. And when you read about it on the dedication plaque, or you see the mosaic, you understand. And you understand what that man meant to the city and what he meant to the world.
Yeah, I did not know that at all. And I just was very touched by that part of the book. I think it's really an important thing for people to know. So thank you very, very much. Now, we're not going to let you escape the rapid fire. So here we go. This is one from me to you, Susan. All right.
Should I be scared?
Again, I did not know this at all. I was so blown away. All right. This place, every solo Beatle, except Ringo, has performed here. You probably already know what it is. Go, tell us about it.
It's Madison Square Garden, which is currently at 33rd Street, 7th Avenue, above Penn Station, the new quote unquote Penn Station, because the old one was torn down in the early 60s, probably when I was a baby or before I was born. But anyway, I digress. Madison Square Garden is known as the world's greatest arena. It is currently the third venue by that name, the original one being down in Madison Square, but this one moving uptown after several iterations. The concert for Bangladesh happened there. Paul McCartney has played there many times, including on his Wings Over America tour. And John, of course, did the one-to-one concert, and also his last appearance with Elton John when Thanksgiving weekend of 1974, when Elton had bet him that whatever gets you through the night would make number one. And John scoffed at the idea because he'd never had a solo number one. And when it went to number one, he made good on the bet. And that was his last public appearance was at Madison Square Garden. It's still used for concerts. It's the home of the New York Knicks basketball and home of the New York Rangers hockey. It's still, you've made it when you played Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, it's play Madison Square Garden and die.
Something like that, yeah.
Just like the Palladium. All right, Lena, we're going to hand it back to you.
All right. Okay, Susan. So are you ready for a last rapid fire question?
I am ready.
All right. So all through the book, Dave, Richard, and you give the reader segments called Fab Four Connections, which is brilliant, in which you point out curious and interesting ways that all four cities, Liverpool, Hamburg, London, and New York, are connected. So one of these segments talks about a man who lived in New York City and made a very impressive living there. But this gentleman was also a philanthropist, and in the early 1900s, he gave a great deal of money to open libraries in Liverpool. In 1902, he traveled to Liverpool to open the Tittenhurst Library. So I'm sure you know who this gentleman is.
So the gentleman in question is Andrew Carnegie. He was a railroad and steel tycoon. Actually, strangely enough, Carnegie Hall being in New York, his name is much more associated with Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You'd be surprised. But in Pittsburgh, there's the Carnegie Libraries and Carnegie Mellon University and all that stuff because he made most of his fortune in Pittsburgh. But in 1891, he endowed the building of a concert hall. And Carnegie Hall was that concert hall. It stands on the corner of 7th Avenue and 57th Street. It is one of the premier concert halls in the world. Beautiful, acoustically perfect, a fabulous place to see any kind of a show. They do children's concerts, they do classical concerts, they do pop concerts. They do other things there. And it's, yes, Andrew Carnegie, I didn't actually know about the connection with Tittenhurst Library until David told me about it, which was kind of interesting because he knew about it and I didn't. So there you go. Carnegie Hall has had, of course, the Beatles played there, right? We mentioned Sid Bernstein earlier, and he brought them to play on February 12th, 1964, on very short notice. Brian Epstein wanted the Beatles to play in New York before they went back to England after their appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, and after they went to Washington, D.C., they came back before they left. And because it was Lincoln's birthday, back in the day, we had Lincoln's birthday on February 12th, Sid Bernstein was able to get the hall on very short notice because nothing was booked because it was a holiday. Right. And they played there as a group. And then in the 90s, Paul McCartney's three of his four pieces of classical music, Liverpool Oratorio, Standing Stone, and Ecce Cormium, all had their New York premieres at Carnegie Hall. So it's got quite a connection in terms of the Beatles as a group and in terms of Paul McCartney as a classical composer. So yes, it's a beautiful and wonderful place, and certainly the legacy that Carnegie Hall is a legacy that Andrew Carnegie left to New York City.
That is just, it's so fascinating. So thank you all so very much for giving your time to be with us today. So you can really see a lot of the uncanny similarities between these four cosmopolitan port cities, and you see the ties that bind them one to another as well. As you watch one character in the Beatles story cross over from one of the cities to the next almost seamlessly, you observe how very much alike these places are. It is a great picture that you have painted for all of your readers to take in.
It really is. And let me hold it up one more time for everyone to see. And I have to say that, I read way too many Beatles books, and some of them are full of great information, but they are only written in an average fashion. And some of them are written beautifully, but there are a lot of mistakes in the book. This book is as factual as it gets. And also it is written beautifully. And I just really, I didn't expect this. I did not know what I was going to expect, but I didn't know that it would be written as beautifully as it is. And you can, I'll let you look at it. It took me about 3 days, I guess, three nights to read it. It's not a long read. Don't be daunted. It's not a Jude Southerland Kessler tome that you can work out with. But everybody out there, you need to get yourself a copy, whack. This is it. This is the book to get. So it is Fab Four Cities. And we, as Lanea said, we appreciate the three of you being here. It's later for you guys than it is for us in Central Time. And we very much appreciate you being with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Absolute
Thank you
pleasure.
very much.
Thank you for having
Thank
us. We've loved talking to you guys and being part of this.
Well, tell us how people can get the book and how they can follow you guys on social media.
Well, the website we have dedicated for the book is Beatles Fab Four Cities. The 4 is as a number 4. So all in one word, Beatles Fab number 4 cities.com. And you go there, you can find out profile of each of us, links for our tours, information about the book, but also what we put together on there is a Google map of each of the cities, and you can go onto the website and you can go and explore all the different cities, and you can zoom in and out, and there's bits of information on all the locations as well.
Are all of the Beatles in it or just John?
Were there other Beatles? I'm waiting for your 9-book series on Paul, and then George, and then Ringo.
I mean, you have to stick around for a long time, dude. Which we would be happy about.
Four cities, four
Susan and
Beatles.
we didn't even know that the other Beatles were in A Hard Day's Night. We found that out in about 10 years ago, right, Susan?
Something like that, yeah.
Thank you, guys. It's been such a joy, and I hope to see you. I hope Omicron goes away, and we can all be together at the Fest for Beatles fans.
Yes.
April 1 through 3. I hope that I want it to happen so badly. So until then, stay safe. Don't get out there and the stuff. I went for one night and got it. So for right now, stay safe. Thank you.
Gail.
Thank you, Jude.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lanea.
There you go.
Thanks, everyone.
Mwah.
Good to see you. See
Great
ya.
to see you.
Bye.
Well, thank you once again to our very, very fab guests. It was just like taking a mini trip to 4 of the most exciting places on the globe. I loved it. Next month, look out. Jude and I are going to be talking with author John Borak about his book, The Beatles 100 Pivotal Moments in Beatles History. Can't wait. We will be doing that show on Tuesday, February 1st. The book is all the buzz, and people are agreeing and disagreeing with the choices of what 100 moments mattered most in the Beatles story and in the world. So you might want to give a nod to one of these choices as well. And join us in February and find out. I said that already, February 1st. So
good they named it twice.
So March 22nd, watch out, because we're going to be chatting with Laura Kortner and Dr. Bill Hieronymus. And they are the authors of the fabulous book, Yellow Submarine. So there's so much more to see and do right here in 2022 on She Said, She Said. Until next time, here's to food for thought, food for the soul, food for the love of rock and roll.
Try and shine on.
Yeah.